Imagine spending years training your horse for one of the biggest competitions of the season. You travel across the country, you spend months preparing, you tuck your horse into its stall for the night, expecting to wake up and compete the next morning. Instead, you wake up to find your horse bleeding from multiple stab wounds. And then you learn it wasn't just your horse, 3 horses had been attacked. Within hours, investigators identified a juvenile suspect. But that immediately made me wonder, how did investigators solve this case so quickly? Today, we're going to explore what happened, what investigators have publicly released, and where this case stands today. Hi everyone, I'm Ashley, and welcome to GORI Explorations. If you're new here, thank you for being here. On this channel, I don't just cover true crime stories, I like to dig into the investigations themselves using official statements, court records when they're available, and other publicly released information to better understand how these cases come together. Before we get started, I do want to mention that this case is still active. Because of that, everything I'll be discussing today comes from publicly available information that has been released as of the time I'm recording this. If additional information or court records become available later, I'll be sure to cover those developments in a future episode. Now, let's start at the beginning. During the early morning hours of May 30th, 2026, competitors were gathered in Las Vegas for the National Bear Horse Association's Professionals' Choice Vegas Super Show at the South Point Arena and Equestrian Center. For most competitors, it was supposed to be another exciting day of competition. But at approximately 2:07 a.m., everything changed. According to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, officers responded after receiving a report that a horse had been injured. When officers arrived, they discovered that 3 horses had been intentionally injured with a sharp object. The horses survived, but investigators said their injuries were expected to prevent them from competing. When I first read that, I stopped for a second. If you've ever loved an animal, you know they're not just animals. For many people, they're family. For these competitors, these horses represented years of training, trust, and partnership. That's what made this story stick with me. At this point, investigators had one major question. Was this a random act? Or was someone deliberately targeting these horses? Police requested assistance from the department's animal cruelty section, and the investigation immediately shifted into high gear. Before detectives had a suspect, before there were criminal charges, there were 3 injured horses, and 3 owners trying to understand what had just happened. One of those horses was Saul Good, better known as Sully. Just hours earlier, Sully had done exactly what he'd been trained to do. He competed. In fact, according to public reporting, Sully had just helped his rider earn a first-place finish. No one could have imagined what would happen just a few hours later. Another horse involved was Detail. Her owner, Ariel Phillips, later described sitting with Detail in her stall late Friday night before heading back to her room. Everything seemed normal. Then, only a short time later, she received a phone call saying something was wrong. Imagine getting that call. You think you're headed back to check on your horse. Instead, you walk into complete chaos. Phillips later described finding Detail injured and frightened. She also described how the attack affected not only Detail's physical recovery, but also the trust between horse and rider. As someone who loves animals, that part honestly hit me the hardest. The physical injuries can heal, but rebuilding trust, that can take much longer. The 3rd horse injured that morning was Rocket. According to public statements from Rocket's owner, Rocket suffered multiple stab wounds but was expected to recover physically. Thankfully, all 3 horses survived, but for their owners, the emotional impact was just beginning. Now we get to the part of the case that really grabbed my attention. When something like this happens at a major event, investigators have a lot to work through. Hundreds of people, dozens of horses, multiple barns, potential witnesses, security cameras, and somewhere in all of that, the person responsible. One thing I kept asking myself while reading through the police release was, where do detectives even begin? The answer usually isn't dramatic. It's methodical. They start collecting information. Who was there? Who had access? Who saw something unusual? What cameras are available? What evidence was left behind? That's exactly why one sentence in the police press release stood out to me. The teen had access to the barn. That one sentence tells us something important. Investigators weren't looking for someone who randomly wandered onto the property. They quickly focused on someone who already had legitimate access to the horses. To me, that's one of the first clues that the investigation probably came together faster than many people expected. Can I tell you what I found interesting? At this point, police hadn't publicly released every detail about the evidence. And honestly, I'm okay with that. As much as all of us want answers, investigators don't owe the public every piece of evidence while a case is still being built. Sometimes, keeping certain information private protects the integrity of the investigation. That was another reminder to me that there's often much more happening behind the scenes than what we see in a press release. The more I dug into this case, the more one question kept popping into my head. How did investigators identify a suspect so quickly? According to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, detectives with the Animal Cruelty Section identified a teenage girl as a possible suspect during the investigation. Police haven't publicly released every investigative step they took, but they did reveal a few important pieces. The suspect reportedly had access to the barn, and investigators also had surveillance footage. Those two details immediately caught my attention, because investigations like this are rarely solved by one piece of evidence. Instead, detectives start building a timeline. Who was there? At what time? Who had access? Who appears on surveillance? Do witness statements match what investigators are seeing on video? It's a lot like putting together a puzzle. One piece by itself doesn't tell you much, but once enough pieces fit together, the picture starts to become clear. One thing I've learned from researching criminal investigations is that detectives often move much faster than we realize. By the time the public hears about an arrest, investigators have usually spent hours reviewing evidence, interviewing witnesses, comparing timelines, and testing whether the facts fit together. That's one of the reasons I enjoy diving deeper into cases like this. The headlines usually tell us what happened. I'm more interested in understanding how investigators got there. According to police, detectives located the teenage suspect at a nearby hotel. She was taken into custody without incident and transported to Clark County Juvenile Hall. Because she is a juvenile, law enforcement has not publicly released her name, and that's important. This case is still ongoing. At this point, the allegations have not been proven in adult criminal court, and there are legal steps that still have to happen before the case moves forward. Police said the teen was booked on multiple counts related to injuring horses, along with felony malicious destruction of property. One thing that stood out to me was the number of counts listed by police. 3 horses were injured, but the booking included 12 counts related to willful or malicious injury to a horse. That made me wonder whether each injury, each alleged act, or each part of the statute may have been counted separately. Right now, I don't want to assume the answer, but it's definitely something I would watch for if formal charging documents become public. A few days after the arrest, the Clark County District Attorney's Office announced that prosecutors were seeking to have the 17-year-old certified to stand trial as an adult. When I first read that, I wanted to understand exactly what that meant. It's easier to hear a headline like that and assume someone is automatically being charged as an adult, but that's not how the process works. Seeking adult certification is a request made to the court. A judge ultimately decides whether the case should remain in juvenile court or move into the adult criminal justice system. According to the district attorney's office, prosecutors believe the seriousness of the allegations justifies asking the court to make that decision. No matter what happens next, the court process will determine how the case moves forward. Can I be honest? This is one of the reasons I always encourage people to wait before jumping to conclusions in an active case. There's often a lot happening that the public doesn't see. Evidence continues to be reviewed. Attorneys file motions, judges make rulings, and sometimes the story changes as more information becomes available. That's one of the reasons I enjoy following cases from beginning to end instead of stopping after the first headline. As of the time I'm recording this video, the investigation is still active. The suspect has not been publicly identified by law enforcement because she is a juvenile. Prosecutors are seeking to have the case transferred to adult court. Police have not publicly discussed a motive, and many of the investigative details remain unavailable while the case moves through the legal process. That means there are still important questions we simply can't answer yet. Why were these horses allegedly targeted? What evidence will eventually be presented in court? What role did the surveillance footage play? And will the case remain in juvenile court or move into the adult criminal justice system? Those answers may come later through court proceedings, and when they do, I'll be following them. Before I wrap up, I wanted to leave you with one final thought. As someone who loves animals, this case was honestly difficult for me to research. These weren't just horses preparing for another competition. They were trusted partners, companions, and years of dedication for the people who loved and cared for them. One thing I'm incredibly grateful for is that all 3 horses survived. While they have a long road to recovery, it could have ended much differently. This case also raises an important legal question. Because the suspect is 17 years old, prosecutors are asking the court to allow the case to be tried in adult court. That doesn't mean it will happen. The judge will ultimately decide whether the case stays in juvenile court or moves into the adult criminal justice system. Personally, I think this is one of those cases where people can have very different opinions. Some people believe the seriousness of the allegations justifies adult prosecution. Others believe juvenile court exists for a reason and that rehabilitation should remain the focus. I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Based on the information that has been made public so far, do you think prosecutors are right to ask the court to try this case in adult court? Why or why not? Please keep the conversation respectful. It's okay for us to have different opinions, and I'd love for GORI Explorations to be a place where we can have thoughtful discussions about these cases. I read as many comments as I can, and I'm genuinely interested in hearing your perspective. If you enjoyed exploring this case with me and you'd like to see more investigations like this, I'd really appreciate it if you'd consider subscribing to GORI Explorations. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. I'm Ashley, and this has been another GORI Explorations Case File. I'll see you in the next investigation.